Good afternoon, welcome, thanks for joining us. My name's Miranda and I am the Birmingham Centre Lead and Apprenticeship Coordinator for British Academy of Jewellery. The British Academy of Jewellery, we have campuses in Birmingham and in London where we run a range of jewellery related programmes, including the apprenticeship that you're here to hear about today. We also run diploma courses, higher education offering also. We also have a range of business diplomas and have other sites around the country which offer those qualifications. So thanks for joining us to find out more about the apprenticeship programme. So we'll start the presentation in a moment. So just before we start, you've got opportunity to ask questions throughout the presentation by typing in the box, the control panel on the right hand side of your screen. We will address the questions at the end of the presentation though. The tab is marked questions to, let me just, questions, enter a question for staff and then you can click send. So any questions that we don't or aren't unable to answer during the webinar, we can follow up and reply by email to those. And all of the attendees, you'll all receive a link to watch the presentation again or to share with colleagues. And you'll also receive a copy of the presentation shortly after the webinar. Okay, so we'll move on to the presentation now. Okay, so the apprenticeship is a level 3 qualification in jewellery, silversmithing and allied trades professionals. This is a picture obviously of our workshop. So the apprenticeship is an exciting opportunity really for both apprentices and employers, for businesses that are looking to bring in new staff, develop their skills with a view to kind of developing their workforce. Okay, so the key benefits of employing an apprentice, it's obviously a cost-effective way to train staff. So bringing staff in, new staff in that you can train in the workplace, but also with the support of the training provider. It enables you to develop a skill set that's relevant to the business. Hold on. Sorry, losing the plot with the presentation. Okay, so it offers you an opportunity to develop staff and train staff relevant to your business that can fill skills gaps or diversify your workforce with the support of us as a training provider. So during the apprenticeship, there are two types of training. We have on-the-job training, which is in-house training within the employment, and then off-the-job training, which is with the training provider, which would be as a British Academy of Jewellery. So it's an opportunity to bring new talent into the industry and secure and future-proof your business, encouraging the next generation of jewellers. You can build a culture of learning and development and promote a motivated and loyal workforce. So as we mentioned, there's a combination of on and off the job training, which creates a diverse skill set within your employees and apprentices that can be utilised within the business, both for the roles that you originally take someone on for, or maybe to develop in the future. So you tend to get good loyalty with the apprenticeship scheme because you've grown with the apprentice, has grown with the business and tends to remain loyal to the employer. It's also an opportunity to promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Okay, so apprenticeships come in different levels. Our apprenticeship is the Jewellery Apprenticeship is a level 3 apprenticeship programme, and we expect it, or the model through which we're planning to deliver it, it takes 2 years to complete. So we'll be recruiting apprentices yearly in September, so in line with our academic year, and they will undertake an initial period of training, which would be 2 days a week with us at BAJ. So for example, the apprentice would be employed with you full time, and then you would release them from the employment to attend the training with us. So that training would be 2 consecutive days per week. So it would either be a Monday and a Tuesday, or it would be a Thursday and a Friday. That would take place from September through to July. So on weeks perhaps where we didn't have training because we have training breaks, then they would be with you full time. Okay, so the purpose of this training would be to develop the core knowledge, skills and behaviours as required by the apprenticeship standard. So the apprenticeship standard sets out all the areas that the apprentice should be learning and developing throughout the programme, and that would be a combination of what they do with us and obviously what they would do within the workplace. So each apprentice is required to have a specialist pathway. So there's a number of pathways which we'll look at later, which need to be supported by the employer. So after the initial period of training finishes in the July, the apprentices would then be with the employer more or less full time and returning to BAJ for specialist training 2 to 3 days per month. So that would then take us from the July until approximately the following June, and then we would seek to work together to establish when we feel that the apprentice is working at or above the standard, and then we can put them forward for the endpoint assessment. So the endpoint assessment is expected to take around 4 months and will be completed within the workplace. The apprentice is assessed within the workplace during that period, so we would need to be in agreement and certain that they're ready for that assessment process in order for it to commence. Okay, so the endpoint assessment process. So the apprentices will have completed their English and Maths if that's required. They will have to prepare a 500-word outline of a selected project, subject, title and scope. So depending on the pathway that the apprentice is pursuing, the project would be developed according to that pathway and the work that they carry out in the workplace. So they would then also put forward a portfolio of evidence that they've accumulated throughout the apprenticeship, which we would work very closely with the employer and the apprentice on to show and evidence that they meet the core knowledge, skills and behaviours. So the apprentice and the employer would meet with the Endpoint Assessment Organisation, also known as the EPAO. The EPAO for the Jewellery Apprenticeship is the British Allied Trades Federation, and that they would work with you to plan the assessment schedule. So the assessment of the apprentice includes their project that they would have the 4-month period to work on. So as an employer, you would allocate some time during that period for them to complete their project. They would need to document that project and record, I guess, their processes and the techniques and tools, etc., that they've used. And that would be a project report that they would then put forward for the final assessment. So the assessor would attend the workplace and observe the apprentice at work and have a period of questioning with them. They would review the project portfolio and also have a professional discussion. Okay, so the apprenticeship pathways that we have already mentioned are as follows. So CAD/CAM processes, casting, enamelling, engraving, mounting, polishing and finishing, silversmithing, stone setting and lapidary. So if you take on an apprentice, it would be essential that you could support one of these pathways. So it's really important that for the pathway, the main part of their learning is taking place with the employer. So this would relate to the job that they undertake with you as an employer. So some companies obviously are able to support a range of different processes or a range of different functions and can give the apprentice some scope of which pathway they would like to pursue. Obviously, other employers, it's kind of more clear-cut in what it would be in terms of the kind of work or jewellery manufacturing that you might undertake. Okay, so some key information, important information for employers. The apprentice must be employed for a minimum of 30 hours per week. So of that 30 hours, you would release them from that employment for the training with us. So obviously initially the 2 days a week and then the 2 days per month, but you would still be required to pay them. They would be classed as their working hours. So apprentices must be paid the apprenticeship wage in the first year of the apprenticeship programme and the national minimum wage thereafter. So this is what you must pay them. Obviously, we would encourage employers to pay them more, and depending obviously on where you're located and whether the apprentice would be required to travel to college some distance, it might be that you want to consider supporting them with the travel arrangements, for example. So all apprentices need to have a level 2 functional skills qualification or equivalent in maths and English to achieve their apprenticeship. So that would be their GCSEs at grade 4 or functional skills at level 2. So when recruiting an apprentice, it's really important to perhaps evaluate this and whether that's a qualification they already have. If it's something that they don't have, they would need to be working at a level that would enable them to achieve that within the time frame of the apprenticeship. So we carry out maths and English assessments, and they would need to be working at a level close to the level 2 in order to undertake functional skills and pursue the apprenticeship. If they are required to do the functional skills, that would be an additional half a day each week, half a day for English and half a day for maths that they would have to attend college. So it's something that it's worth bearing in mind, obviously, because it's less time in the employment and in the workplace while they're studying for that as well. So during the apprenticeship, we carry out reviews approximately every 8 weeks, and that would involve a member of BAJ, the apprentice, and the mentor at the place of employment. So it's not something we could do in person, or it's also something that we can do online, and we would just be looking at the progress of the apprenticeship at the training of that at that point. And obviously, as we work towards the endpoint assessment, we'd be working quite closely on putting together the evidence and supporting in planning and writing the project brief. Okay, so the apprenticeship costs and funding. So if an apprentice is aged 16 to 18 or 19 to 24 with an educational healthcare plan, then they are entitled to the fully funded apprenticeship by the government, as long as the employer employs less than 50 persons. So if you employ more than 50 persons, there is a percentage that you pay towards the training for the apprentice. So as we mentioned, the progress reviews will take place approximately every 8 weeks. If the apprentice is 19 plus or the business has 50 or more employees, then the business pays 5% of the training costs. So the full training cost is 16,000. So the full cost payable by an employer, or the most that would be payable by an employer, would be 5%, so that would be £800. Before the apprentice starts, we carry out an initial assessment of their any prior knowledge and existing skills, and the funding may be adjusted at this point to compensate for any skills they may already have. So if you were a levy paying company, then the full 16,000 of training costs is paid from the levy fund. Okay, so in terms of recruiting an apprentice, it's really crucial that as an employer that you're taking on somebody that you're happy with, that you would employ under ordinary circumstances as well. So you would be required obviously to carry out your usual interview processes and make sure that they're right for the organisation, and also that the apprentice is comfortable with the organisation that they're going into. So the government have a free recruit and apprentice service, and it's possible to advertise vacancies through that. We can also support with that. We have a job template form. If you were able to outline for us a role that you might have available, then we can share that with potential apprenticeship candidates, and we can put you in touch with them and liaise. But again, it is also really important that you use your usual recruitment process to make sure that the fit is right, because the program's obviously 2 years long, and what we want to make sure is that whoever you employ is right for your business. Okay, so we can provide you with our job template, which you can complete to help us support you with recruiting an apprentice. So in terms of eligibility and enrolment, if you want to talk directly with us, we can advise on the eligibility of the business for funding for the apprenticeship programme. We will also carry out initial assessments of the apprentice's existing skills, knowledges and behaviours prior to enrolment. We will be assessing the apprentices to make sure that they are suitable and eligible for the programme as well, prior to agreeing an apprenticeship placement. So once you have an apprentice that you're ready to enrol and that all the eligibility checks have taken place for both the employer and apprentice, the process that we go through, the employer is required to register in the apprenticeship portal and reserve funding for the apprenticeship. We would have a contract of services which is issued between BAJ and the employer. We would have an apprenticeship agreement and contract which would be signed between you as the employer and the apprentice. And we also have an apprentice training plan which details all the training that we will be delivering throughout the apprenticeship. That would need to be signed by all three parties, so BAJ, employer and apprentice. So all of these things would need to be in place prior to the apprentice commencing their training with us. So the start date of the apprenticeship would always be the first day of training with BAJ. Okay, so any questions we can happily answer now. So something else I was going to say. I can't hear you, Danielle.
Shall we try again? Does that work?
Yes.
You've got me now. Good. I'm so sorry, everybody. Nothing like a technical issue. It worked fine before we went live. It's always the way, isn't it? So I was just saying, Miranda, thank you so much. We have had some questions come in. If that's all right, I'll read those off to you and answer those. So just give me 2 seconds to pull those up. So a couple of questions come in. I think we may have addressed some of these as we're talking, but it'd be good just to go over that point again, just to make sure that we're all clear. First up, we've got what subjects will be covered during the 9 months they attend BAJ's course on the 2 days a week they're in college.
Okay, so when the initial period of training, when the apprentice joins us for 2 days a week, they will take part in our level 3 diploma in jewellery manufacture and design. So that's been mapped to the core knowledge, skills and behaviours of the apprenticeship. So that combines jewellery manufacture, design, some 2D CAD and professional studies. So the major part is the jewellery manufacture with smaller percentages of design, CAD and professional studies. So the idea is they get a very rounded experience, a wide skill set that they can bring back to utilise within the business where they're working.
Excellent, thank you. Next up, I've got, could you provide an overview of the instructors and mentors who will be guiding the apprentices during their time at BAJ?
An overview of, so who specifically? Or
exactly, a little bit about the tutors. Who are they? What backgrounds have they got? Who are they being taught by the apprentices?
Yeah, so I'm not sure specifically who would be teaching the apprentices in London. In Birmingham, because we're a much smaller team, it would be a combination of the 3 members of staff here. So all of our tutors are professionals jewellery manufacturers, they've had different kind of backgrounds. So some have come through a manufacturing background, some have had their own businesses, but most of them generally are working manufacturing and designing jewellery as well as tutoring. So all very industry relevant.
Excellent, thank you. So I've got another question here, which is around location. It's quite specific to this employer, so bear with me. So a question around location. We are based in Wales, where we sit under different apprenticeship funding. Are there differences we need to bear in mind with regards to funding and so on? So that's part one of the question. So I'll let you have that one first, Miranda.
Okay, I think that might be something we would have to look into then, if whether being in Wales that they would come under the same apprenticeship scheme. I know we've looked at this with Scotland before and it was slightly different, but I can't answer off the top of my head for Wales, so I'd have to look into that and come back to you.
No problem. So we'll follow up with that bit on via email then after the webinar. The second part of this question, also you mentioned at the start 2 locations, Birmingham and London. Are there 2 locations available to learners, or do we outsource to other education establishments, considering viability for travel for the apprentices?
So at the moment, the only options really are to study with us in either London or Birmingham. So we have had this coming year, some of our apprentices are travelling a little bit of a distance, so we've tried to work with them to accommodate, you know, which days of the week that they'll be on, so that it's easier for them to plan travel and accommodation if required. So obviously it is a much bigger a commitment, but it is something that you would need to consider, because at the moment there isn't the option to do the training at any of the training providers.
Okay, thank you. So another question, they keep coming in. So if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the questions tab. We will get to them. If we don't know the answer, we will come back to you on email. So next up is, what types of jewellery materials and tools will apprentices have access to during their training? Okay,
so while they're doing the training with us, primarily we will work in base metals, because we're practicing. We're starting right at the beginning in terms of, you know, marking and measuring and how we're working with metals, etc. We always utilise silver as well. We don't have the option particularly to work with high value precious metals, but obviously the apprentice may have the opportunity to do that in the workplace.
Excellent,
so in terms of tools and equipment as well, I guess, we're working very much from a traditional perspective, so traditional techniques and hand processes, so learning how to manufacture from scratch with your hand tool.
Wonderful. So then there's kind of another part that I'll just tag on to the end of that question. Are there any then technologies or softwares that the students will use during their time at BAJ?
So in terms of the CAD, we're looking primarily at 2D CAD initially, so we will use Adobe Illustrator. So then we take them from Adobe Illustrator, we start to do some 3D CAD, so we'd be using Rhino software.
Lovely, thank you. And I think the last one I've got for now is, could you just recap the prerequisites and specific qualifications required for individuals to apply for apprenticeship?
So for the apprentice, they mustn't have any prior qualifications within the jewellery related field. They can have a qualification at any level if it's in a different subject, but what they ideally will have is maths and English at grades GCSE grades 4, which is a GCSE pass, or functional skills level 2.
Excellent, thank you. And one more that's just come in during that question is, how do you handle apprentices who may be struggling with certain aspects of the course, and what support systems are in place to help them succeed?
So we obviously work quite closely with all of the participants. So as they're going through the first period of training, there'll be assessments and deadlines and so on. So we work with them on an individual basis. So as their tutor and also their apprenticeship coordinator will work with them to make sure that they're keeping up to date. If we have difficulties, say for example, it might be requiring different resources or working in different formats. We work quite a lot with an online platform. There's the options to record say rather than do text. So it's on an individual basis, but we try to work with them individually to kind of assess what their needs are and what we can do to support them. But obviously I think the maths and English part is quite key. So if they tend to have those qualifications, they tend to have the ability to work at the level that we're requiring, and that's probably one of the main things that we're doing when we're assessing the apprenticeship, their suitability for the programme, is that they do have the capacity to kind of manage the workload.
Lovely, thank you. And I've had one more come in. And what's typical class size at BAJ?
So our maximum class sizes are 20, so there'd never be more than 20 in a group. So that would be for the initial period of training. For the second part of the training, when they're doing the more specialised projects, it would just be the apprentices. So that would depend on the number of apprentices that we have at any one time. But again, maximum would be 20.
Lovely, thank you. So Miranda, that is all the questions we've had in so far. If anyone does want to follow up, obviously your contact details are below, but I'll leave you to wrap up and finish the webinar off. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks very much for joining us, and obviously, as Daniel said, if you have any further questions, please send them through and we will do our best to answer them for you. Thank you very much.